when you pay your taxes, what you're doing is acquiescing to the government seizing your money at gunpoint.
Okay, it's Saturday, May 23rd, 2020. It's Season 2, Episode 10 of Barney and Clyde. We're going to talk about the fine line between caring versus grandstanding. Does Trump have the authority to make governors open churches? Do governors have the authority to keep them closed? Purity of vision and facts on the ground. Is it possible to put together a non-leftist party with a discernible set of principles? The state and the individual in a time of pandemic, parts 1 and 2. New Zealand's warrantless searches bill, and Rand Paul's fight against no-knock warrants in the United States. And meanwhile, back in the Circle City, we're going to talk about Indianapolis kicking restaurants while they're down. The city plans to close Massachusetts Avenue, a major nightlife thoroughfare, to foot traffic despite protests from business owners that they have already heard. Barney and Clyde, welcome back.
Indeed.
To the libation station, the digital libation station.
Yeah, this is what, about our fifth go round doing this remotely, socially distanced.
Yeah.
Long time viewers, we're now well into Season 2 of this thing, and long time viewers know that customarily, when there's not a pandemic going on, we meet at the libation station, which is my bar right across the room down here from my office here in my basement. And if it's the middle of the day, we have something like some kind of a fruit beverage or a tea or something like that, or
something interesting. Yeah,
exactly. Clyde's very good about finding interesting things and if it's closer to evening, we have something a little more spirituous. And we deliver this fortnightly and forthrightly. We do this every 2 weeks, and we take 4 matters that are currently on the nation's plate, and give them an examination from a libertarian point of view. That would be Clyde, and a conservative point of view. And libertarians and conservatives are cousins, if you will. There's a lot of Venn diagram overlap in terms of what we value and hold dear, and it mainly the common ground is a belief in the primacy of human freedom. That's the quality that is essential for human flourishing. That plays itself out a little differently for conservatives and for libertarians, and the things that tend to fall outside the Venn diagram would be foreign policy and certain socio-cultural issues. But it's all very interesting to explore, and our viewership has been growing, and obviously somebody finds it interesting, and so that's the premise. And since we have not been meeting at the libation station, but we've continued to each of us have continued to pour ourselves something bracing to have on hand as we get into our 4 segments. What do you got there? Oh, black and tan.
I've got a black and tan.
Did you do the little?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I attended bar for a long time, so I have experience doing it. But
so we've got Guinness and Bass Ale, maybe, or something like that.
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm not a fan of Guinness or Bass. They're both fine. There's nothing wrong with them. But I found that Murphy's Irish Stout has a lot more malt characteristic. It's a lot more flavorful, and it's a little bit less expensive. So it's a really great value. And on the bottom, I'm an American beer snob, so I like a little something a little hoppier than something like Bass. I like the Englishness of Bass Ale, but putting a good California style IPA on the bottom,
very good,
is pretty nice. So actually, a Chicago brewery, Lagunitas IPA, is on the bottom here.
And you did a stellar job of getting it to come out cleanly layered. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I just got a good old vodka tonic with well brand vodka.
Is it Four Freedoms?
Mm-hmm. Which yeah.
I saw that in the store the other day and thought of you.
Yeah. I'd like to know more about. I ought to look up the company, the distillery that makes that, because I really like the name. And yeah, Four Freedoms vodka and Schweppes tonic water, which for a while was hard to find any place during the peak of the lockdown.
Yeah, finding diet tonic is always a pain.
Yeah. So anyway, that's who we are, and that's what we're all about. So, and we've got these 4 segments. The first of which is, the fine line between caring and grandstanding. Usually, we're talking about some leftist who's got his or her heart out on their sleeve, and I care so much about you that this is why I'm proposing this draconian limit on your freedom. But this time, it's the very stable genius. That would be Donald Trump. Pandering, and he is pandering. What it's all about, per a article at Politico by Gabby Orr yesterday. Why did he decide to do this? He is losing support, and we were also
not sure. Well, we pointed out in the beginning, in the segment introduction, what this was about.
Yeah.
But let's refresh the.
He at his presser was, I guess, yesterday. Would it have been? No, or 2 days ago. He said, how did he word it? Let's see here. States are allowing liquor stores and what else did he say? Abortion clinics to be open. It's high time we let houses of worship be open too. And I mean, you know, so that, like I say, the fine line between caring and grandstanding. Who's going to argue with that?
I'm not going to argue with that. I think he's exactly right. Yeah. He may be grandstanding, but I don't think he's wrong.
And okay, and so, but here he is indeed grandstanding because, like I say, per this article in Politico yesterday by Gabby Orr, he's losing support among one of his key demographics, and there's a couple of other key demographics he's losing support on, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But one of them is evangelical Christians. He's bleeding support among them, and so this is a blatant attempt to shore that up. That's why he's doing this. Okay, now we get to the legal parts of it.
Okay,
does he have the right to do this? And there was a great article at the Resurgent today by Steve Berman, and the title is "Can Trump Override Governors and Make Worship Essential?" And the first word in Berman's piece is no. Per the 10th Amendment, things not specifically, powers not as specifically laid out as being those of the federal government in this document. If you didn't find it here, it's a matter of the state or the individual. State and a little farther down the article, states possess what's called police power to open, close, quarantine, and regulate. The federal government has certain powers that are strictly delimited and does not include the ability to reach down into states. That's the fundamentals of federalism. That's what federalism is all about, and override local decisions. Governments, as long as they apply restrictions to churches equally to other businesses, requiring social distancing and limiting crowd size, are free to tell churches they should not meet or to impose penalties for defying those orders. Now, and then there was an article at Reason back in March, which anticipated a lot of this stuff, by a guy named Damon Root. And he digs into the whole history of this. William Blackstone, the British legal theorist, back in 1765, in his landmark Commentaries on the Laws of England, defined the police powers. He got into the whole notion of police powers and defined it as the due regulation and domestic order of the kingdom, whereby the inhabitants of a state, like members of a well-governed family, are bound to conform their general behavior to the rules of propriety, good neighborhood, and good manners, and to be decent, industrious, and inoffensive in their respective stations. And then, in sometime later, a little over a century later, in 1871, the American legal theorist Thomas Cooley, in his influential treatise on the constitutional limitations which rest upon the legislative power of the states of the American Union, said the police powers of a state embrace its system of internal regulation, which by it is sought not only to preserve the public order and to prevent offenses against a state, but also to establish for the intercourse of citizen with citizen those rules of good manners and good neighborhood which are calculated to prevent a conflict of rights and to ensure to each the uninterrupted enjoyment of his own, so far as consistently is reasonably consistent with a like enjoyment of rights by others. And one of the examples that Cooley gives is quarantines. And then Damon Root goes on to say there are 4 questions or 4 things that constitute a framework for whether you can do the exercise of police powers by a state government. The first is whether the law, regulation, or order serves a genuine public health or safety purpose. The second is it the least restrictive means available to the state to pursue its legitimate public health or safety objective. The third is whether a temporary measure has exceeded its shelf life. Was necessary yesterday, but no longer is today. I guess there were only 3, but you see what I'm saying? If a state's going to do this, it's got to pass those tests.
I have a few questions there. You said that a temporary measure would have had to have exceeded its shelf life, basically, and I think that's the place where we are, where we had a temporary measure, and it's exceeded its shelf life. It far exceeded it, and we already know enough about social distancing while not socially isolating and complete quarantine to take reasonable precautions now. And then the least intrusive measure, right? It's got to be the least intrusive measure. And so far, putting people on lockdowns, to me, seems to be almost the most intrusive measure. Like it's completely intrusive.
Yeah.
But I also want to go back to the constitutionality portion. You were talking about the 10th Amendment, and the 10th Amendment does, clearly define that anything not specifically expressly defined in the Constitution of the United States as a whole is relegated to the states to decide for themselves. But in the cases where it violates a core amendment, like the First Amendment, for example, that guarantees every citizen the right to their religion and the free expression thereof, and the right to peacefully assemble with no number cap whatsoever. You have the right to peacefully assemble with whomever and however many people you wish, and you have the right to do that in a religious context or any other nonviolent context. So to me, it's like the president doesn't have the authority to open or close the churches or the restaurants or anything else, and nor does the governor of any state have the right within the state to close churches or anything.
Are you saying that would have been true at the height of the virus's impact on our state, when cases were at their peak and hospitals were getting
Yes, I am making the claim that the Constitution has not changed within that time frame.
Okay. All right.
But like, not that it wasn't important that we take measures, you know what I mean, but that the Constitution gives people the right to choose for themselves. And I think a lot of people were choosing to do the right thing, and I don't think that these draconian measures were ever necessary. The shelter in place situations, and again, let me go back, because I don't want to be labeled as somebody who wants old ladies to die or something like that, because I'm poo-pooing social distancing. I'm not. I think you should take those measures. I'm poo-pooing the fact that they didn't apply it equally. That I saw somebody, I don't know if this is true or not, but somebody was lamenting that their AA meetings couldn't go on, but liquor stores were deemed essential and were open. You know what I mean?
Yeah, interesting point. Yeah.
You can't go into a local place here in our town, local mom and pops, but you can go to Costco. You can go to, well, it's no Costco here, but you can go to Sam's Club. You can go to Walmart. You can order from Amazon. Like, there's all these places where, people are packed together and there's no restrictions. I don't understand how it's safer there than it is at mom and pop,
And part of this gets into something we were discussing, I think it was last time. both libertarians and real conservatives, and I'm going to have a chance to get into what I mean by real conservatives in our next segment, but agree that there's a difference between being pro-free market and pro-business, if you will, because they are not the same thing. There is a level of a business organization, a corporation in this country that is able to employ lobbyists and take their legislator out to lunch to, hey, there's a bill coming up next week and here's how I want you to vote and all that good stuff. And not available to the mom and pop level. And that's, and it plays itself out in large corporations being able to do things in situations such as a pandemic / lockdown that are not available to a locally owned business with limited resources.
Right, and that's why the free market has such a bad name, is because every time someone says the words free market, what they really mean is crony capitalism. You know, this situation where I'm going to invoke the use of force of government to force my competitors out of business, or I'm going to force regulations upon my competitors, or whatever it might be.
And Adam Smith anticipated this. I brought this up last time too, I think, in his great work, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations.
Yes.
And Adam Smith is, we think of him as an economist, and he kind of was the first economist, but what he was a professor of moral philosophy at the University of Edinburgh. He thought about these things from a moral angle. And he says in The Wealth of Nations, sure as anything, when two business people in the same line of work get together, if they don't have moral guardrails on their own hearts and souls, they're going to start colluding on things like prices and stuff, you know, and that's just human nature. And he says that's something that has to be accounted for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why, that's why I'm so, I don't know. I don't want to say that I'm anti-government, because I think that is also a cliche. Like I'm anti-violence, you know. I'm against violence and people using the violent potential of the state in order to benefit their industries, their businesses, whatever agenda it is. To me, I think that's just the highest crime.
Which gets back to, you know, we were introducing any new viewers we might have today, our Venn diagram. An important principle to remember in all of this, and it's going to be a relevant factor in all four of our segments today. Government is the only entity in our society that has a monopoly on the legitimate use of force. We've got to have some government so that we don't have absolute chaos, but it's got to be very minimal and very delicately employed, because they're the only ones that get to use the guns. You know?
Yeah. Well, I'm still hashing out my opinion on that. Like I've always been very well.
When a policeman says step outside your car, you don't have. That's not optional. You know.
Well, here's the thing: when the policeman says step out of your car, I'm personally going to step out of the car because I'm a wuss. And I don't want to put up that fight, but I'm not going to
really complicate your life to not do that. Yeah.
I'm not going to, for example, I'm not going to stand on, I'm not going to risk my life to make some kind of statement, because I'm just weak that way. There's no way I'm doing that, but it doesn't make it right. It doesn't give them the authority to do that to me. If they don't have a warrant or probable cause of some kind, then they should go to hell. But
okay.
But I'm going to step out of the car, and I'm probably going to comply because I value my safety, and I realize that these people.
You got a wife and kids at home and all that. Yeah.
And I realize that I'm dealing with a person, and I've met great police officers, and I've met terrible police officers, and who knows who I could be dealing with? What sociopath? What insane person I could be dealing with who is armed?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. But that and we've also talked about that. The whole when you pay your taxes, what you're doing is acquiescing to the government seizing your money at gunpoint.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, and that sounds so raw and so crudely put that people, oh gosh, you know, we don't.
It's so correct though.
Exactly.
It's so correct. You say when you comply and you pay your taxes, you say, I'm okay with the tyranny that this organization commits. Henry David Thoreau, I can't remember the exact wordage on the duty of civil disobedience. He said something to the effect of, you think of not paying your taxes as a crime or as an immoral choice, but how much more immoral would it be to pay them? You know, because all of the immorality that's going to take place with those resources, it vastly exceeds the immorality of not paying them in the first place.
Yeah, we'd probably come up with different things, but neither you nor I approve of even 1/3 of the things that government on any level does with the money it takes from us.
Right, and when Thoreau said that, he also said in that paper in Civil Disobedience, he said, I can't abide a government that is the slave's government also. Yeah. You know?
Well put. Well, how do we take this home? How do we
I don't know, because we're way over time.
But I want to make sure that we, let's see.
I think it gets back to the Constitution.
Does the president have the authority to make governors open churches, and do governors have the authority to keep them closed? And like you said, it's a First Amendment issue. People that want to get together and where two or more are gathered in my name, you know, it goes back to that principle for Christians. And I don't want to exclude Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, others. It's really true for anybody that's one of the most essential things that people get together to do is engage in fellowship as fellow adherents of a belief system, and then government getting involved in that.
Yeah, and don't forget that churches, and again, I don't want to just say Christian churches only, but you know, religious entities are the catalyst for almost all of the charity that happens.
Exactly.
And when do you need charity more than now?
Yes, thank you. And now, you know, the conservative in me comes out, you know, Bill de Blasio and all the progressives in New York wanting Samaritan's Purse to get out of New York and all that. I don't want to digress too much, but, you know, Christians, for heaven's sake, open their wallets in times like this, like nobody's business. All right. Yeah. So are we over time? Is it time?
We're well over time. Yeah.
All right. Well, and we may go, heads up, we may go over time on this one too.
But the conversation can continue. We've got Facebook, we've got Gmail, we've got Twitter, YouTube.
Yeah. Chime in on comment threads in those venues, or email us. Let's continue this conversation, all you in the BNC community. Yeah,
absolutely.
And so is this one. Purity of vision and facts on the ground. About 2 or 3 months ago, we came up with this category title because we were looking at, is it quixotic to expect a political party to put freedom front and center among the things it stands for? I want to take just it's related, but a little different angle today. Because I've been thinking about you, Clyde, and your bunch, and then it got me thinking about my bunch.
Okay.
Your bunch, of course, is the Libertarians, and it was interesting. Longtime viewers know this. New viewers will find it interesting that about 3 or 4 episodes ago we had Jacob Hornberger. He had him on as a guest was greatly frustrated that, as Clyde here is, that the Libertarians cannot come up with somebody who wins the primaries and is their candidate who really and truly stands for their principles and is not, as Jacob Hornberger put it, Republican light.
He's also called Justin Amash a libertarian interloper.
Oh, okay.
Which I just loved.
And you know, now, being a conservative, I would look at that differently, but I respect what's happening with you people. And I've followed some of the comment threads you have.
People. Just kidding.
You people. I've even got some friends among you people. Why, I've had them over for dinner before.
Just because you've got a few libertarian friends, it doesn't mean you can say the L word.
Yeah, really. Anyway, so tell me a little about the fissures and fraction lines and faction lines within your party and your movement. Jacob Hornberger appeals to you far and away more than any of the other candidates, right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And what's been happening for the last, say, 4 or 5 election cycles that just frustrates the hell out of folks like you?
Oh man, if you really want to be frustrated, take a deep dive into this election cycle.
Okay.
But the previous election cycles, it's no secret that, of course, name recognition is the single most valuable, asset someone can have
in politics, generally speaking. Yeah.
As far as being electable.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
and that's why Gary Johnson quickly became a star on the level.
And why not? Why shouldn't Gary Johnson
and governor of a state,
Bill Weld? I mean, that really was sort of a dream team ticket if you think about it. If that was like a Republican pairing, you had a governor of New Mexico, 2-term governor in mostly a blue state, maybe a purple state, but like, you know, the repeated Democratic governors. He won as a Republican. Bill Weld, the same thing, Massachusetts. He was the governor. I'm not sure how many terms he served. I think he served as many as he could.
Okay.
Respected, well-liked leaders, and against Donald Trump, who had no political experience and no executive experience in government, and Hillary Clinton, who also had no executive experience in government. But the question is, were these guys really that libertarian? You know, I think I like Gary Johnson a lot. I think Gary Johnson got a lot of heat he didn't deserve. Bill Weld,
Gary Johnson became kind of a lightning rod, though, for a kind of a stand-in or a symbol for those who say, "Oh, libertarians just want everybody to be able to smoke dope."
And I agree. I think he really dropped the ball. And I'm again, I like Gary Johnson, and he's done a lot for the liberty movement. And he through a foundation, I think of his founding, I'm not really sure, sued the Federal Election Commission for keeping third parties out, and worked with other third parties like Green Party and those to make election polling and elections more fair, and not held hostage by the old parties, which get tax money to have their parties basically, and who use their connections to keep any competition out, right? So anyway, I don't want this to get too long-winded, but basically, in order to get into the debates, you have to poll well.
Yeah.
Right? You have to poll at 15%. But in order to poll at 15%, you actually have to be in the polls, right? So when they call you and say, who do you prefer, you know, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, or Jacob Hornberger, if they just say, who do you prefer, Joe Biden or Donald Trump, you're not going to hear that third name.
Right.
You know, or Gary Johnson in 2016. They didn't hear that name, so they didn't check that box. And then they say, well, look, Johnson can't even get 15%. He nobody cares enough about him to put him on the debate stage, which is probably keeping him off the debate stage was probably the best thing to happen to his campaign. But again, I like Gary Johnson. I just don't really like.
No.
I don't like the promise he broke to us because, like you said, he said when he got the nomination that he wasn't going to smoke any pot because he wanted to keep his head clear and, and be able to fight the good fight and have all of his wits about him. And he clearly broke that promise. Well, actually, he said, I didn't smoke any, I just used edibles. And it's like,
Okay.
it's like, you son of a bitch. That's not, that's not what we meant,
Right. And in our conversation with Jacob Hornberger, this came up that there seems to be kind of a tentativeness, maybe even outright fear among libertarians of putting forth someone who unequivocally says, here are our principles. Boom, 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 bullet point. We stand for this, 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 and this, and we don't compromise on that.
Absolutely.
And actually, us conservatives, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, have the same dynamic going on.
Yeah.
The same issues going on. That's your. How's he speaking of polls? How's Jacob Hornberger doing among libertarian candidates right now? In the lead.
He's often in the lead.
Okay.
So far, it looks like it's pretty close between Hornberger and a woman named Jo Jorgensen and a guy named John Mons.
Okay.
Those are the three top contenders, and Hornberger, he is that. He absolutely is unapologetically about, here are libertarian principles. This is what the movement is about.
Yeah.
And like he said on our show, if libertarians aren't going to stand up for libertarianism, who is?
Yeah.
Right. And that's my point, is the Libertarian Party, they carry the name libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when the public goes, what's this libertarian thing all about? And that's what they look towards. What they need to find when they get there is libertarianism. They need to find that core set of beliefs. And so that they can either agree with them or disagree with them, either stay or move on. But why do we want to fill the ranks with a bunch of people who don't share our principles, who don't have the vision of the free society?
I hear you, buddy.
What's winning? What's the point of winning and being in charge if you have to compromise all your principles?
I hear you.
Cheers.
Okay. Now, let me tell you about my bunch. Donald Trump was this cluster bomb that was brought into the room called conservatism and detonated.
Yeah.
It blew our movement up.
Yeah.
Anybody, average Americans, people of any stripe, far left, center right, libertarian, whatever. Everybody knows who Donald Trump is, going back to the late 80s when he came out with his first book, The Art of the Deal. He's been on the scene ever since, and then he started, he made the society pages of all the New York papers for who he was dating or who he was cheating on, or who he was cheating on his wife with, and all his interviews on Howard Stern his zeal for putting his brand on everything, Trump Airlines, Trump Steaks, Trump Vodka, Trump University, there's a story I love to, I can't remember which building, but he was having a building designed by, and he got some really prestigious architects to design it. Some high rise he wanted to put up somewhere, and they just about had everything done, and they had a meeting with him to say, here's where we stand. And he says, I'd like to have big gold T's put all over the lobby. And they said, Mr. Trump, really, that's not going to work thematically with what we've come up with. And wouldn't it be great though? No. And they finally convinced him. All right, you guys, okay, I guess you're the experts, but it was right. Like pulling teeth to get there. And that's who he is. Self-glorification is all he's ever been motivated by. And we all know that. I mean, it's what his TV show, The Apprentice, was about, and the whole shooting match. And so, and over the years, he's teased the public in various TV interviews. I may dip my toe in the pool. I may get involved in politics one of these days. I got some ideas about what to do if I were ever president, blah, blah, blah. And then, so he finally decided, July 2015, he descends the escalator at the Trump Tower in Midtown Manhattan and announces he's doing this. And right off the bat, serious grown-up conservatives understood that this was not a good thing. It was not more than 2 or 3 weeks later that Thomas Sowell, yeah, I'll bet Thomas Sowell, somebody you greatly admire, isn't he?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Historian and economist.
Yeah, he's probably one of the most brilliant people living.
Oh, absolutely, and a champion of freedom and common sense, and I mean, and Thomas Sowell wrote this excellent piece. And it's dated. I mean, it has not held up well in terms of publications that have come along, like the Bulwark and the Dispatch. They're also, hey, you know, Trump is what conservatism. Not so, as we said in a couple of segments ago. He's losing support among evangelicals. Kristen Soltis Anderson, who is a pollster and columnist for the Washington Examiner, has made it very clear. He's also losing support among older white people generally, which has been another demographic that he's depended on for his base. Those are the people that turn out at his rallies and hell yeah, and all that stuff. He's losing support. And he's starting to panic. You know, you hear stories coming out of the White House that his behaviors are becoming more erratic, and he's got to be placated more and stuff. And that's what occasioned his decision to play Mr. Tough Guy. You know, I'm going to see that the churches reopen. So my point is that just like you guys, my bunch deeply fractured, the deep fissures that I don't know. I don't know. Maybe conservatism's not going to wind up being the term that describes who a person like me is.
Well, I like that you have a separate word from, you have conservative, and typically the Republican Party has been the champion of conservative values, right? And you have the neoliberal. There's
always been factions. I mean, you know, Barry Goldwater got his clock cleaned in '64. Yeah. And you know, there's always been this Rockefeller wing versus the.
Well, that's my point, is that you have a conservative and a Republican, and again, Venn diagram overlap, but they're not the same thing. And then you have a liberal and a Democrat, or a progressive and a Democrat. They're not the same thing, but there's overlap. But you have libertarian and libertarian, and it's like you say the word libertarian and you automatically get associated with the party. And again, you know, I don't want to disassociate with the party.
Come to my mind when I hear the term libertarian.
Yeah, but it's like this fused together, and I think there's some differentiation that needs to be more in the public purview. But
hey, I gotta say, once again, we're running pretty long, aren't we?
Yeah, we are, but it's a good conversation. I'm in.
This is we're getting to the meat of what is happening in this country now, and so once again, please chime in on send us emails, get on the comment thread at our YouTube, at Facebook, all that stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think we can make these next two a little shorter, maybe.
Okay. And I got a suggestion. I suggest that we head up 65 to Indianapolis and talk about what's going on Massachusetts Avenue, and then see for New Zealand. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, because this is.
Oh wait. Massachusetts Avenue is closed to traffic. How are we going to get there?
Very good point. Very good point. Once we get there, we're going to have to park our car somewhere else and walk, aren't we?
Right, we are. Yeah. Then how are we going to social distance ourselves from all the other people who are forced out of their cars?
Yes. Okay. And oh boy.
All right. So let's go back and preface this for our fine listeners and viewers.
Yeah. This show, hopefully, it's being watched nationwide, worldwide. Let's just paint the scene a little bit. Massachusetts Avenue juts diagonally northeast out of downtown Indianapolis. As a matter of fact, Indianapolis was designed by the same guy who designed Washington, D.C., Alexander Ralston. And the concept was the same. You have a circle with hubs, that is a hub with spokes going off of it. So Massachusetts Avenue juts diagonally northeast out of downtown, and it's, for the last several decades, it's been a hip area where lots of great trendy shops and restaurants and great jazz club down there called the Chatterbox, which I've seen several great shows there over the years, and all that good stuff. And very lively, lot of economic activity.
Yeah, and they've extended it. It's a long stretch of road now, and it's where we want to be downtown. And Indy's a great town.
Yeah.
And it's very underrated, but it's Mass Ave is wonderful.
And Mayor Joe Hogsett and I guess his staff, and I don't know, was the city council in Indianapolis involved in this? Somebody got the big idea to, I'll bet the restaurant owners would like it if they had more outdoor seating so they could socially distance people. So let's close it off for the next 3 months so that they can do that.
Right.
Like a kind of a benevolent big brother attitude. We'll fix them up with more social distancing. They didn't want it. They got together and put together an open letter to the government of Indianapolis saying, no.
Right.
And it seems to be some mixed opinion, to be fair, but it sounds like the majority of business owners by a large margin didn't want that, because most of them were forced into a carry-out mode only already. Yeah.
So if they didn't have outdoor seating, then that was all that they could do. They could have a little outdoor seating, but if they didn't have that, they had to do only carry-out.
Not to mention other merchants besides restaurant owners.
You
needed people to be able to park nearby their stores.
That's right. There are retailers there.
Yeah.
But
well, the signatories to this open letter, and everybody from David Andrzejczyk at the Chatterbox to the owner of Bazbo's Pizza to City Dogs Grocery, a home decor store. And it just runs the gamut, all kinds of stuff. Mass Avenue Condo Association. Yeah, I mean, signed this letter saying, and the letter says, for one thing, you're asking for trouble from a public health point of view. Among our main concerns is virus proliferation, funneling the city population of Mass Ave for what will be, in essence, a street fair with alcohol for 3 months.
Exactly.
It's a recipe for disaster. The people, hey, man, more quarantine. Let's get downtown and party tonight at Mass Avenue. And,
Yeah, and if they wanted it, under normal circumstances, if the businesses wanted to shut down the street for a night, they can. They can petition the city council.
Yeah.
Go with the proposal.
Form a free association, which is what.
Yep. Bribe the appropriate people, and then you get your permit.
Yeah.
And then you're good.
I put out feelers on Facebook. How are things going? What's the general mood now that this is in effect? And one guy said, it is a block party atmosphere down here. Another person said, people are grumpy. And I asked him to elaborate. He didn't have anything to say, but.
Well, like you were saying, block party, that's the government has been telling us this whole time to keep away from each other. And now they want to have a freaking block party.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll go to the block party. That sounds great, but goddamn, are you kidding me?
At the very least, it was ill thought out, Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not talking social distancing. You're talking, people meandering up and down the street.
Yeah, exactly. And now Mass Ave is longer than it used to be. So there's a restaurant that I love down there called Black Market.
Okay.
And it's all the way at the end of it, right? So as Mass Ave cuts through, it eventually stops right by the interstate loop, and there's a little restaurant there called Black Market. It's fantastic. I highly recommend you go.
Okay.
But I ain't walking into that thing,
Mm-hmm.
Especially what if it rains, and everyone's got their outdoor seating and the streets closed. How are these businesses going to survive? They didn't. The problem is that they didn't, from what I understand, survey the restaurateurs and the retail shop owners and these people and find out what they wanted them to do.
That's their main point. We were not consulted. You just laid this on us.
Right.
Yeah.
It's central planning. This is government central planning. This is, I hate to be hyperbolic, but this is communism. This is the top overlords who don't know the industry, who don't know the nuances of the business, deciding what's best for those industries and businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, over and over again, it's the presumptiveness that central planners who are removed from actually happens in that realm of commerce, presuming to know what they need.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
central planning always fails.
Okay. Now, our segment on New Zealand, I looked this up. I did a little, I did some prep when you told me you wanted to do this, Clyde. Now, the only article I could find, it's pretty good, but it does. I didn't find anything about who in either the New Zealand legislature or the executive branch of their government cook this damn thing up. I mean, this is talk about draconian, being able, without a warrant, go into people's homes. You got too many people in your house tonight,
Right.
We're hauling.
Okay. Yeah. So I didn't look up, I did not even think to look up who the legislators were that proposed this bill. And I guess that's probably
because
because
close.
I wouldn't have recognized any of those names.
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, to your point, it was to enable police officers to be able to enter private homes and break up gatherings that were exceeding the numbers that were arbitrarily set by government as to how many people you could have in your house, and it would allow, instead of, if you had a violation, instead of having to go to court, you just get a ticket basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's pretty scary that what they put together here. The latest version of it seems that they got something in place already that was pretty draconian, but this latest one is a change to the original law that has a few safeguards on it, as far as how much police power, how far it can go, and things like that. But the first one had nothing in it,
and they shortened the time. This is only in effect for 3 months, I believe. But
sure it is. Just like the Patriot Act was only.
Yeah. But New Zealand, for heaven's sake, I mean, that's one of the most Western countries within the West, I mean, and I'm speaking of West as more philosophically than geographically.
Yeah.
But
they're very leftist there. They're very, very far left.
Oh, okay. They've always kind of leaned that way.
Right. Yeah, they've got a large social structure and things like that. But I think New Zealand's probably, it's a nice place. I don't think it's, it's not North Korea.
Right. But, and my understanding is that cases have leveled off, or maybe even COVID cases have leveled off, or maybe even gone down there. Why would, and they have one of these multi-stage reopening things, and they've entered into a less stringent stage. Like I say, this article was not real well put together. It was from a website called stuff.com. Mm-hmm. And there were links to previous articles about the subject that helped to give background, but I don't understand that if they were going to a less stringent stage of their lockdown, why this law was being introduced. Just very strange.
Yeah, what's funny is the defense of it, right? So they were speaking to some of the defenders of it, and they said, here's a quote from that Stuff article you mentioned. We hope that the power would only be used really as a last resort, and police use education and other methods. This is obviously a high provision for privacy in your own home in a private dwelling. It's like, we hope. Our hope is that the police use this as a last resort. It's like, but like, this is policy. You can't hope for stuff. You got to put provisions in here,
Exactly.
And then they said the public should ensure that they don't get used to it and not become a part of the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is temporary, so don't get used to it. But like, how quickly did everyone get used to lockdown and quarantine and wearing a mask and, staying 6 feet apart and not hugging and not shaking hands? Like, how quickly did we get used to that? When we were watching, TV just from, a few months ago, and you're like, whoa, those people are standing a little too close together. Oh, they just shook hands,
Yeah.
So people get used to stuff really fast.
Shifted that way. Yeah. What do we got left in the way of time, my good?
We should probably move on to Rand Paul a little bit here.
I'm going to let you. I'm going to let you take that, and I'll because you're more up to speed than I am.
Okay. Well, basically, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Probably not. It's probably not necessary for me to give a background on who Rand Paul is, but
by training and and his father is a major figure in the libertarian movement, and
yes, his father was Ron Paul, the great Ron Paul,
yeah.
Who ran on the Libertarian Party ticket in 1988, I think, and ran for president on the Republican ticket in 2008 and 2012. Yeah. And those both had a dramatic effect on the liberty movement. But so anyway,
Rand Paul
was championing legislation to end no-knock serving of warrants, right? So basically, when you have a no-knock warrant service, you're serving a warrant, but you're not announcing a police presence, right? So that basically means that the police are just breaking down your door and going in to bust the place up. So this came out of a case where the Louisville Metro Police shot a woman in her home. Her name was Breonna Taylor. She was a 26-year-old ER nurse, some kind of medical tech. She may not have been a nurse. I'm not really sure how that works, but anyway, so the police were there to serve a warrant to an ex-boyfriend of hers who hadn't lived there in some time, on the grounds that he may have left behind some amount of drugs, and that if he did, they needed the no-knock warrant in order to, I don't know, get the surprise on them so that they don't flush it down the toilet or whatever.
Yeah.
So they come to the house and they break in. They invade this person's private property, this upstanding citizen who by all accounts is nothing more than a contributor to society and a perfect civilian. And her boyfriend, his name was Kenneth Walker. He hears people breaking into the house, and he gets up and grabs his legal firearm.
And this is the current boyfriend. He's not got any. He's not the one the police are interested in.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Correct. This is somebody else.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure what the time frame here is, but it's this is some time after.
Okay.
So it's not new. This other guy's been gone a long time. He's not listed as a resident on the property. Like, he doesn't live there.
Yeah.
They had a line on her old boyfriend and where he was living, and it was miles away from where they were. Mm-hmm. So this is a perfect example where they could have just knocked on the door and said what they were all about and told them that they wanted to search for these old drugs, or there may have been something left behind, whatever, serve the warrant. She doesn't have time to do anything. She just has to comply. They have a warrant. They can go in.
Yeah.
So anyway, so this her most recent boyfriend gets up in the night and hears people breaking in, and I believe he fired on them, and then they just killed everybody in the house, which was, him and this Miss Taylor. And so Rand Paul submitted legislation saying that these no-knock warrants are invalid and should never happen. You should at least have to announce the police presence.
Well, they do nothing but get people killed.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be the case. Anyway, there seems to be so many cases of people, of police going to just simply the wrong address, and shooting people through the windows and stuff like that. And it seems like this is common sense that they should have to announce themselves. This seems like the American way.
Well, where does Senator Paul's legislation stand right now?
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
I think this is just submitted, but it seems to get a little bit of flack from the Blue Lives Matter kind of group. And I don't mean to bring the name in it specifically, but a lot of people defending the police angle on this is like, well, you've got to have law enforcement and you have to be able to get the drop on people. And I don't think that there's zero merit to that argument, but I think it's, in America, you're innocent until proven guilty.
To make the better argument. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So how do you feel about that? Do you think that there's
I think I see the sense in what you're saying, Clyde. It's not something that I stop to consider real often, but I think I see the sense in what you're saying. There needs to be at least a lot more clarification about the circumstances under which no-knock could be done, because so that something tragic like this situation in Louisville doesn't occur.
Yeah, I know. I kind of think it speaks to a problem of sort of rubber stamping warrants. I mean, in this country, you get a warrant before you can search a home or arrest a person. Okay, I got that.
Yeah. But
it kind of seems like that. I mean, we're talking about New Zealand. They're like, nah, you don't need that. Well, it kind of sounds like you don't really need it that much here either. Like, a warrant seems to be so easy to get, and this no-knock warrant, this deviation from that situation seems to be pretty easy to get.
Yeah.
This thing that's supposed to be for special circumstances, outstanding circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But according to this article in the Courier Journal, the Louisville newspaper, that there are roughly 20,000 no-knock warrants served each year.
Wow. Well, I think this one falls within the Venn diagram overlap. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, Barney, it's been a pleasure. I think we probably better wrap it up and get people out their merry way.
And thank all our viewers and listeners. This thing's growing, and it's very gratifying to see that. And principally because that means people are interested in having a conversation about freedom and about what America is really all about. And so thanks a lot. And we do this fortnightly and forthrightly. So in 2 weeks, belly up to the libation station, pour yourself something bracing, and join us again. And in the meantime, stay vigilant about your freedom. You got a bunch of people with you or something? What's the mask all about?
I'm digital distancing. Bill Gates is trying to give us all computer viruses, so I don't want to get something through the computer.
Okay. All right. Let me call my wife.
Didn't you hear? Bill Gates is trying to give us all like some kind of crazy Microsoft vaccine and give us all computer viruses.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess that wasn't as funny as I hoped it would be.
Well, that's an interesting development.